Welcome back. My name is Mike Roberts. I'm the founder and chief apprenticeship officer over at San Diego Code School, and we are a social enterprise that is developing tech equity through our groundbreaking apprenticeship program. If anybody wants more information about that, you can visit us on the web, stcs.io. And we do this every Tuesday, 7 a.m. I basically jump on and answer questions. Last week, we kind of shifted from doing it in Zoom to doing it live using, I guess, Facebook and YouTube. So there were a couple questions that came through that I didn't snag because people were kind of lost in the interwebs between the Zoom and here. So I'll definitely address those questions today and give folks an opportunity to, again, just ask away. There should be a chat box or an ability for you to send messages via both Facebook and YouTube. So at any point, make sure that if you have questions, drop them in there right away so that I can get started on answering them. More than happy to take the full hour, just answer whatever questions that you have about the job search process. A little bit of background about me. I've spent the last 4 years or so in the code and boot camp space, code school and boot camp space. So I've helped lots of engineers get through the process of basically convincing a company that they're worth taking a chance on and providing an opportunity. And that gives them a chance to grow beyond just a 6-month boot camp experience and get the additional time that they need to get paid while learning the rest of the skills to get from junior to mid to senior. And that's really, I think, the smartest way to approach the process is just to think about crossing that initial threshold and getting paid to learn every single day after. So what I've tried to do is create that opportunity for folks that are on the super early edge of their career, and that is create a way for them to get paid while they're going through the actual initial training. And so that's what we do at San Diego Code School. We offer an apprenticeship program. So we have a registered apprenticeship program with the state of California. And that allows us to pay people starting wage $18 an hour and gives them some experience under the belt. It's a 12-month program. So we are currently not accepting new folks. So it's not a rolling cohort. Instead, we'll have another cohort that will probably start, we hope, in the fall, but as late as the spring. So, sorry, not the spring, winter. So we'll have a cohort definitely by the winter. So I want to talk just at the top of the hour a little bit about assessing skill gaps, because I think that's important for folks that are trying to get themselves prepared for a technical interview and prepared for what the challenges might lie ahead in terms of convincing folks that you've got the right skill level. And then you will be able to hopefully fill some of those gaps and be able to have a stellar performance on the day that you do your technical interview or interviews. So I'd say the first thing is to kind of get used to, I know a lot of folks want to be able to rely on Google, but get used to being able to open up an empty editor and being able to write a little bit of code. I know for a beginner that can be quite daunting because you don't have all the muscle memory built up of this is how you've written, an Express server. And I could do one by just rote memorization, but the reality is that's not any different than how I would suggest that someone that's in the beginner phases do the same thing. Like, the only way you're going to get really good at it is by getting some reps in. So rather than thinking about, like, I've been coding for 32 years, rather than thinking about it taking 32 years, just think about it takes a certain number of times of writing that code before it just becomes muscle memory. You can do it without thinking. So surprisingly, it's not that long. So if you're a beginner and you know a little bit of JavaScript and you've learned Node, you could probably, in the matter of a week or so, you could build up the muscle memory to be able to just sit down and scaffold out an application without having to use any sort of Googling or a template. So want to get yourself to there. It's a little more tough to be able to scaffold like a React application because it's got a few dependencies and a few things you've got to set up with like Webpack. But it's still doable. So I would say you should be able to scaffold an HTML, scaffold a Express server, create maybe an API endpoint, and be able to show that you could actually, build a small single-page app without checking any resources. If you can't do that, then just keep grinding on it, keep practicing until you can. So I know that's super painful, but you should assess your skill and see where you're at by opening up an editor and see how far you can get. And then when you identify a gap, great. That's what you need to practice on. And just keep honing that until you can actually do it without any kind of, assistance. No cheat sheets. The next thing that I would suggest that you take up in terms of assessing your skill and the gaps that you might have is HackerRank. A lot of employers use HackerRank as a mechanism to sort of screen out candidates. And so I would say best thing for you to do would be to jump on HackerRank, start at sort of some of the easier challenges, and work your way through progressively. You should at least be familiar with that interface because some companies will expect you to complete some kind of a code challenge on HackerRank. And then the last is any kind of daily pairing or coding challenge website. I think it's super valuable. For example, we used Code Wars a lot at San Diego Code School. And so I would say just main takeaway from that is that you shouldn't be practicing in isolation. It's super cool if you can solve some of the harder ones, but it's more important that you solve even an easier one with another human being, right? So try and remote and, join a session and see if you can walk through the process of communicating your thoughts and breaking down the problem and working together and collaborating and speaking technically, because that's the critical skill. Not just solving the problem, but being able to communicate your thought process and being able to communicate to someone technically. Because when you're on the job as a junior engineer, when you get stuck, you're going to need to be able to communicate effectively to be able to get help and be able to quickly get through blockers. So being able to do that, super duper important. So once you've kind of assessed where your gaps are, and it should be pretty obvious because you might get stuck and you might get stuck really fast early on, but it will take you longer and longer for you to get stuck as you do some more effort and practice towards this. I've talked before about the breakdown of the different percentages of time that you should spend each week on different facets of the job search / training that you should continue to be doing. And so I would again just suggest that you fill in some of the gaps that you have by working on projects, right? And that will give you an opportunity to exercise troubleshooting and debugging skills as well. And then know when to stop. Know when, hey, you're at the point where you're getting through these types of skills assessments. You kind of feel like you're solid and you can rip through some basic scaffolding of applications pretty easily. And that's the time for you to go out and see if you can start applying for jobs and see if you can shift gears into more passion projects and not projects that are like learning based. And then really focus on what types of jobs do you have available to you in your job search, and then how do your skills align with those jobs, and then continue to fill in those gaps, right? So that said, I think super important for you to be assessing where you are so that it's not a surprise during an interview and they're like, you're way off of where you thought you were. So in terms of questions, I see a couple coming through, so that's awesome. Just again, make sure that if you do have questions, looks like mostly on YouTube, then just drop them in the box and they'll come through. So the first question I had is, what kinds of projects make a portfolio look good? I personally like projects that show some sort of nice, clean looking user interface and then demonstrate hopefully a full stack range of skills. So you've got some data being pushed through to the back end, being persisted and stored. You've got some of that data being pulled back into the front end and then neatly displayed. So as long as it checks those boxes for me, I can see, and you've shown and demonstrated that you have the ability to connect what things happen on the back end with what things should happen on the front end. Again, clean, hopefully responsive UI, so that when I collapse it down and make it smaller, like on a mobile device, still looks decent. You should be using like a mobile first philosophy about creating your UI. And it doesn't, again, have to have super deep number of pages, etc. I would just say it needs to look super clean. And you want this to be the best reflection of your work possible. This is why I suggest that you keep the project small and lightweight and not try and build this big behemoth of a project to demonstrate that you can do all of these different things. I'm also not a fan of ride-alongs and just completing a project that's part of a video series. I think you need to demonstrate that you can think out of the box and that you can create something that's pretty much from scratch. And even if that means you watched the video and you kind of got the concept from the video, but instead you created your own customized version of the application, that's a lot better than just copy, paste, and then throw your own picture or logo on it. Not a good idea. I can smell those a mile away, and I'm definitely not interested in talking to those kinds of candidates that think that that's like going to amaze me or impress me, because it's not. Anybody could do that, even if they have zero coding skills. They can watch a video and transcribe the code and get it to work by just paying attention to the details. So that doesn't demonstrate you have any skill. Next question I had is, what are the prospects for an apprenticeship opportunity this year at STCS? So I think they're good. So we hired 9 apprentices, and that was a little bit more than I had initially thought, but we ended up having amazing candidates applying for the roles. So we stopped at 9, and then I would anticipate, depending on how many more projects that we get from local companies, we'll either start another cohort in the fall or we'll start another one in the winter. So it's definitely some good opportunities. However, I would suggest to folks that if between now and the fall, you get several months, get out there and get a job, right? Don't just think that you'll be able to sit and, the apprenticeship is something that's worth waiting for. Instead, focus on getting a job, focus on creating the skills that you need, and you may get a better opportunity than the apprenticeship. The apprenticeship was really designed for folks that have not had any coding experience to be able to transition into a role and give them the training plus experience to make sure they can get into their first opportunity. If you already have some skill, you've already gone through a program, you've already mastered some of the training material that we've provided online, then there may be better opportunities out there for you. Not that this is not an opportunity available, but just there could be something even more amazing. So another question, what is expected of a mid-level dev? So I think these terms are used loosely within the industry. So most people talk about early career developers as junior level or entry level, or they might use the word junior to mid. And I think when I use that term, what I'm using it to classify is someone that has more than a year's worth of experience, but not quite at the point where they can work 100% autonomously and work out major architectural and features of a full-fledged application. So would I ask a mid-level engineer to design and implement an entire application on their own? No. I would say they still need to be working with someone that has more experience to be able to help them with the architectural decisions and sort of like verify. Not that they have to only be able to follow somebody else's plan, but I'd want the mid-level engineer to be showing their design and showing their thought process of how they're going to create this application to a senior and getting some input to make sure that they're not painting themselves into a corner or creating something that's going to be super unwieldy and hard to maintain. So I think they still need close supervisory / mentoring from a more senior individual. That's when I think of a mid-level engineer, that's what I'm thinking of. When you start saying mid to senior, it's somebody that can, for the most part, work autonomously and very rarely needs to meet with a peer and understand, okay, from an architectural standpoint, what are the things that I need to keep in mind as I'm building this out? And so eventually that goes away. And as a senior engineer, you can take an idea from product and you can bake a solution that solves that business problem. And it usually is not going to require you to need to have other people involved. And instead, if you need additional expertise in a particular domain, you just go out and learn that additional piece and be able to apply it in real time in the application you're building. So that's what I would say, senior engineers. So junior or entry level is enough skill to be able to break things and be able to fix things, right? So entry level, you're just learning, you're a sponge, you're soaking it all up. By mid, you're working a lot more independently. By senior, you're working on your own. So that's kind of in my mind how I use those junior, mid, and senior. And then you can always add a little like mid to senior, right? And so the progression also varies. So if you work at a shop where you do a lot of the same tasks over and over and over again, you'll probably stay at whatever level you're at when you come into that shop and not progress very quickly. However, if you get a chance to work at maybe a small, scrappy startup and you're working on lots of different projects, lots of different domains, exposed to lots of different parts of the tech stack, then you might be able to move from junior to mid really fast. And then again, from mid to senior really fast, because you're getting lots of reps, lots of experience. So in terms of time frame, that's kind of what the time frame scenario is like. It just depends on what kind of work you're working on. But it's realistic that you could be mid-level in 2-3 years, and you could be knocking on senior in 3 to 4 years. So, a question about whether or not I should learn some new language like C++, C Sharp, Java, or should I just really master technologies I've learned already? It depends. I'd say if you're at the point where you feel super comfortable with the first language that you learn, whether that's JavaScript or Python, and you're now at the phase where you feel comfortable enough that you could solve code challenges in that language, you got the syntax down, and it's time for you to expand, and you're ready to like, okay, I'm going to invest a little bit of time in learning a brand new language, then go for it. I'd say the second language is probably, hands down, of those three, probably C Sharp, with the close second being Java. I would not learn C++ as your second language, unless you have a very specific use case for that. C++ is used largely for like embedded devices and other things that require high performance, but it's not used in as many shops that do like line of business applications as like C Sharp or Java, which are far more popular. So you're narrowing your job opportunities significantly if you just decide, oh, C++ is the same as C Sharp, and it is not. So you can certainly use transferable skills. So if you learn C++, then it will be easier for you to learn C Sharp and Java, but they're not 100% interchangeable, and it'll be to your advantage to just pick either C Sharp or Java as your second language in most regions of this country, because those are used in most of the shops. So, again, if you guys have questions, feel free to drop them in the box. We are answering them pretty quickly. So, next question: how many projects should you have on your portfolio? I'd say I'd like to see a good range and variety. So at least 3-4 projects would be healthy. I don't think you're going to gain very much more by having a ton more projects, but if you only had 1 or 2, it might not be enough of a range for me to really see like where your skill level is. So I would probably be wanting more. I'd probably, say, let me see if I can find some other projects that this person has on GitHub or something. So then I'm going to be actively searching for more things, which is not necessarily what you want. You want to control it. You want to have a controlled experience where you're sending someone to your portfolio page, you're kind of surfacing some of your best work, and you're keeping them busy in those 3, maybe 4 projects of really like, oh, wow, this is deep. And they may not take the time to go through all your projects. They will probably randomly pick one of the projects, start clicking around inside of the project. This is how I do it. I'll find a portfolio, I'll randomly click on one of the projects, and I'll see, is the link broken? Is the website live? If it is live, is it throwing error messages in the console? I can just very quickly try and shoot holes and figure out like, is something busted, or is it pretty solid? And if it's pretty solid and it works, then at that point I'll probably move on and look for their code. So I'll look to see, do they have a GitHub, a link to their GitHub? So I go to the GitHub, look and see, are there green streaks? Do they code every single day? If they code every day, major bonus points. I'm probably just going to stop at that point and see if I can get them on the phone, see if we can set up a phone screening. But if I see that there's like these patches of green and lots of spaces of white, then I'll be like, well, this person doesn't really code every day, so what are they up to? Then I'm like a little investigator. I'm trying to figure out, are they working on tutorials? What do the projects look like, right? And I'll go in and I'll look at the projects. If the projects look like tutorials, be like, nope, this person's not ready, right? They're not at the point where I'd be like anticipating hiring them as a traditional shop, right? Not necessarily as an apprentice, but as a traditional shop. If I were a hiring manager looking to bring on a junior engineer and I saw green in a few places, but lots of white on the streaks, hopefully everybody understands what I'm talking about that. But on GitHub, there's a way that you can see how frequently the individual is committing code. That's really all it is just how frequently there are commits. And the darker the color green, the like more large the commits are, the changes, the number of commits, right? So it's an indication. It's one indication of how much code that someone is writing and committing to GitHub. So you want to be doing that. You want to be coding every day, and you want to be committing your work so that you can show people that this is something that you do on a regular basis, and it's not surprising to to you to be sitting down in front of a computer and be coding, right? But if I saw like a bunch of white and be like, this person doesn't really like to code, so why are you applying for a software engineering role, right? Those two things don't add up. So hopefully that answers in terms of the number of projects. I'd say 3 to 4, probably healthy. You're good to go. What types of questions do I ask during a phone screening? Depends on the role. So if I were hiring for a junior software engineer or software dev role, I would probably ask a few questions just to figure out if the person is at the skill level that they think they're at or that they say that they're at. So I might ask a question like, how would you rate your JavaScript skills? And notice that I didn't give a number, right? So sometimes people infer that there's a number there, and so they will use a number and they'll say 7. Be like, all right, 7 out of what? 7 out of 10. All right, okay, cool. So you're giving yourself a C. And then the question is like, all right, so if you're giving yourself a C as a beginner, that's fine.
These are the top results.
Google wants to participate, apparently. So at this point, I would say, okay, they've said that they're 7. They've given themselves a C. Now I would ask questions that are at what I would consider to be, if this is a junior position, around a C for a beginner engineer, right? So I might ask them to, can you explain what what a closure is, right? And it's a little harder, right? But as a JavaScript engineer, you should be able to explain a closure. So, or can you explain what the difference is between let and const, right? Those would be C's. Like, those are some syntax questions. Those are not super hard, right? You should be able to knock those out of the park. Now, if the person was a senior engineer, I would ask a lot more nuanced questions. I might ask questions about how they prioritize tasks, or what do they do when they get like blocked and no one's available. Things that can demonstrate they've clearly got autonomy and they know exactly what they're going to do. They'd rather, ask for forgiveness than like not do it. So they'll just like, I'll make the decision I need to, right? So it'll just vary depending on the skill level. Hopefully that makes sense. There are tons of places where you can go and you can find entry-level JavaScript questions for like phone screening. And keep in mind that a lot of the folks that you're talking to on the phone screening may not be software engineers. They may just be HR people. And so they have like memorized a set of answers to questions, and they may not even know like what that actually means. They just know, okay, you're going to be listening for these keywords when you ask this question, right? And so anticipate that on the phone screening. It may not be a highly technical person, but they've just asked this question lots and lots of times. So they know when your answer falls within the norm of the better answers, and when your answer is like, well, that's weird. That doesn't make any sense to me. So you're not going to get bonus points in that one. They really are acting as the gatekeeper to just minimize the number of folks that the actual engineers will end up having to talk to on site. So their job is just to like surface the best candidates out of a pool of like 100 applicants, so that only 5 of them have to actually be screened by the next round of screeners. So hopefully that helps. Which website should I be applying to for job interviews? So I think you want to separate interviews from the process of applying, right? Because there's multiple steps, and you're not going to go straight from applying to interview. So the process is typically applying, following up, phone screen, interview. So I wouldn't think like applying is going to equal interview, because there will be a big difference between the two. So you want to get your ratio of applying to about 10 a week. You should be applying to 10 jobs a week. You should be researching the companies. You should know quite a bit about them. You should be finding internal champions, reaching out to them, having meaningful conversations with them, really understanding who it is and what type of company that you're applying to. So then once you've done that, then you'll follow up. And out of those follow-ups, you'll get some phone screenings. And out of those phone screenings, you'll get maybe 1 or 2 interviews. And so that ratio should hold true. Now, in terms of where you should go to find job listings, I would say from everybody's got a different vibe that they get out of the different job sites. So what I would suggest is find whatever works for you, right? So some people just hate a particular site. They're like, I hate using this tool. right? Then don't use it. Use something else. Like use something you enjoy using so that you will use it and you'll get in there and you'll do the work that you need to do. So I personally have found a lot of luck with my personal favorites are LinkedIn and ZipRecruiter. I think LinkedIn is like next level in terms of connecting with folks and surfacing job opportunities. Craigslist is a sleeper that a lot of people ignore, but like Craigslist folks, you could get, they're usually super savvy folks that know what they're looking for. And that's where a lot of folks are looking for like entry level. They may have a little bit lower budget, so they're budget conscious. I mean, a lot of folks don't realize, but like to post a job on something like Dice or Monster, it's about $400 or $500. So if they're posting a job there, they're spending $400 or $500 to put that job out, versus they could put a job on Craigslist for like $25 in a city, something like that. I haven't put something on Craigslist in a long time, so I'm dating myself there, but it used to be like $25. So that's a big difference between like having to pay a giant amount of money or putting it on Craigslist. Indeed's a little bit different because Indeed you pay per how many people click on your job listing. So you could get away with like putting a job on there and having a small daily budget, and maybe it doesn't cost you $400, but it might still cost you like $100 or $200. So don't sleep on Craigslist. Craigslist is a good one. Plus it's fun. Craigslist is like kind of weird, kind of Wild West. So I'd check out Craigslist. Glassdoor is good because Glassdoor will also give you information about the companies, and you can kind of see positives and negatives, see some of the benefits, see some of the other opportunities that might be available beyond just the entry level roles. And then, as I mentioned, the Indeed is sort of like the shotgun approach where you have lots of volume, but you'll have to pick through and you'll have to find the good stuff. It might not be as easy to surface it. So those are what I consider my top and favorites. Lots of other tools that are out there, so you got to find what works for you. I would think if you're using just those tools, that's plenty for you to find opportunities. And again, 90% of your job search should be networking and talking to folks about what opportunities are available. You'll be able to find them posted in places in San Diego, like San Diego Tech Hub, San Diego JavaScript Meetup Group, Operation Code, like all of the places where there's big communities of people that are trying to learn how to code. You'll find people going to try and find entry-level software engineers. So makes sense. People trying to find the right spot to find the talent that they're looking for. So what advice do I have for someone who may have imposter syndrome? Ooh, that's a tough one. I'd say you gotta, as much as you can, just focus on not letting it be problematic and stress you out, and instead just realize that you're going to feel that way for a really long time. When I say really long time, I'm talking like 2 years on the job, right? 2 years on the job, you're still going to feel like, man, I'm going to get fired today. They are going to realize I have no idea what I'm doing. And then eventually you get to the point where you're just like I don't care that I don't know what I'm doing. I'll figure it out. Give me a couple hours. I'll figure it out, right? Just like get out of my hair so I can work on this. I'll figure it out. And you will stop worrying about the fact that you're not going to have instant answers to everything. Where someone asks you a question, you're just like, I don't know. Right? But I can find out. So give me a little while, dig into it, and we'll figure it out, right? Or it's a bug, and initially you're super frustrated, and then eventually you're just like, we'll figure it out. We're just going to get closer and closer to where the problem is, and eventually we'll identify it, and we'll fix it. We'll be good to go. So there is no magic like this thing is going to happen and then suddenly you're just going to feel comfortable. You're not, and you shouldn't, because it's tough. So if it were easy, then everybody'd be doing it and no one would make any money. So this is just one of the things I'd suggest you kind of you got to suck it up. You got to put your big boy, your big girl pants on, and you got to just say, I'm going to feel this way for a while, so just get accustomed to it. So that's my advice. Just get used to it, because it's not going to go away. Everybody knows I'm a big cycling guy. Greg LeMond has a great quote, and that is, when you're riding, it never gets any easier. You just go faster. So that's what I think about coding too. It's never going to get any easier, but you'll get faster at it. You be quick. You'll be able to find things faster. You'll spend a lot more of your time reading code, you'll find, in your career than you do writing code. So that's good. And maybe even deleting code. That's awesome. If you can delete code, get things working better, that's awesome. So you will feel a certain way, and so you are in control of that. the sooner you can just like resign yourself to like it's not gonna feel comfortable and being okay with that, then the imposter syndrome just gets easier to deal with. But you're gonna feel that way. You're gonna feel like there's no way I'm as smart as like these other people around me, or they're gonna find out that I really know nothing, and then they're gonna fire me. You'll deal with it. All right, I think we're running short on questions, so everybody's being entertained, but you're not asking questions. So if anybody has additional questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'll stay here as long as we need to answer all the questions. If we run out of questions, then we will just go away, and we can sync back up next week. The main opportunity for you, I hope, is to just get these questions off your chest in a safe environment where you can kind of say, this is what I'm thinking, or these are the issues that I'm facing. And I can tell you from my perspective as both an educator, a mentor, and from the perspective of someone that has hired lots of engineers, what are some of the things that I'm looking for. So this, again, is a great opportunity for you to drop a question in the chat. You can also shoot me an email. My email is Mike, M-I-K-E, at sdcs.io, and I'm going to do a quick check and see if anything's come through. I don't see anything yet, so we might be changing these to half-hour sessions if folks don't have as many questions. But okay, someone asked, what do I mean by internal champion? So when I refer to internal champions, what I'm talking about is someone inside of the company that can be an advocate for you. So I'll give you an example. You're applying to company XYZ, and at company XYZ, you happen to know one of your friends, and your friend has been working there for a little while and says, hey, you should apply. There's this entry-level role. This, I think, would be a great opportunity for you. They are hopefully going to become an internal champion for you because they've told you to ask and to apply. So when you apply, you tell them and you say, hey, I just applied for that job that you said I should apply for. Great. That person can now go to the HR person and say, hey, you should be on the lookout for Janet's resume. Janet is going to be applying for this role, and I think she's a great person. I've known her for a long time. That's what I mean by like being a champion. They're an advocate for you. They're going to be on the inside pulling for you and seeing if like, hey, can we get her in here for a phone screening? She'd be perfect for this role. We should definitely see if we can get her in for an interview, right? Those are the types of individuals you need to have. Now, you're not going to have that fierce of an advocate in every company, but it's important that you find someone inside of the company that can at least keep an eye out for you and make sure your resume doesn't immediately get printed and then tossed into the wastebasket, right? I've seen that happen so many times, and happened to people that I was an internal champion. So when I saw it happen, I was like, hey, what happened with that person? Did they end up applying? And they're like, yeah, but like their resume looked like garbage. And so like, we're not going to bring him in for a phone. So I'm like, I think we should. And let me have the resume. And then you go walk it over to another hiring manager and you're like, hey, can we do a phone screening for this person? Right now, if that person isn't around, if I wasn't there to like grab that resume out of the waste bin, that person would never have a shot at that job. Right. So you gotta sometimes have those folks inside. That's what it takes. That's the difference between you getting your resume like in front of someone that will take some time and go through it and get you to the first round, which is to the phone screening, or you don't make it out of the blocks and you're dead on arrival. So you need to have some people inside, at least one person, if it's possible. What else? Any other questions? Hopefully this was super helpful. So there were two questions that came through last week that I mentioned I didn't get a chance to respond to because I didn't see them until after we finished. The first one was, with respect to your apprenticeship program, is there any way to participate in non-traditional work hours or fully remote, even after the pandemic? So the answer to that question is no. We're trying to create an opportunity that's a little bit different, but that's not something we can offer at this point. At this point, we're trying to have a sort of a traditional shop where we can have everybody working all at the same time, hopefully in person as soon as it's safe to do so. So we can be super efficient and we can create high performing teams and give people lots of reps at what it's most like going to be, what it's mostly likely going to be when you're on the job. And so that means that, working at the same time, working in an environment where you can see and talk to other people. While we all are working remote right now, that's largely not what was happening before the pandemic and may not be what happens after. So I don't want to commit to we're going to have a novel solution to make it easier for people to just get into the apprenticeship or get through the apprenticeship. The idea is to prepare you for day one on the job, not to create sort of a way to facilitate more flexible arrangements. Sure, we want to be as flexible as we can, but we also want to mirror what it's going to be like in the real world. And so that's just not the way it is for most companies, what I consider pre-post pandemic, and who knows what's going to be post pandemic. So if post pandemic we're all still remote, then we'll probably still keep doing a remote thing. So someone said part of that was they would really like to use the avenue for a career change, but they're hesitant to give up a stable job, especially in these odd times. Well, sorry, but that's tough. We've tried to create an opportunity where you get paid to learn how to code. So if that's still not enough for you to burn the boat and go all in, then this is not for you. If that's not enough motivation to say someone's not going to actually pay you to go through a coding program, you are probably not going to be successful in this field until you decide to light that boat on fire, and then you have no choice, right? So I'd say that's probably the thing that you have to consider. Not if we can make the apprenticeship more flexible so that you could have your cake and eat it too. Yeah, it's not likely to happen. So if an apprenticeship is not possible, and it's not for most people. So just to be clear, our percentage of people that can get into the program is somewhere way below 10%. And that's just because we don't have the capacity for everybody that applies for it. So most people are not going to make it into the program. Lyft did an apprenticeship program. They had 1,000 people apply for 8 roles. So it is not something where everybody's going to get in. And because of that, you should have a primary plan for how you're going to get yourself to where you want to go beyond the apprenticeship opportunity. Because it's great, but I can't train 200 people a year, right? It's going to be a much smaller number. So what would I recommend? What steps would I recommend for the next 5 months to be able to make themselves a good candidate for a full stack or front end position? I would say the key is going to be getting yourself to the point where you can be productive on day one on the job and be adding value for that organization. And the way that you would do that is coding every day, going through, I'd say, some structured curriculum. So we have curriculum online. Free Code Camp has curriculum online that will cost you nothing to go through. App Academy has some free curriculum online. So there's a bunch of curriculum that you can take online. And I would also not be shy about spending $50 a month to be part of Front End Masters or Team Treehouse, some other resources. I mean, it's a pretty good investment at most of them are $25 to $50 a month in monthly subscription fees. If you can't afford that, then just use as many of the free resources as possible. And every day, if you're spending the time, you're investing in yourself, then you will be able to get there. The question is, how many hours did you spend? And if you're coding 20 hours a week, so roughly half of a 40-hour work week you're coding, then you're going to be fine. And I think you'll probably get there inside of 6 months to a year. If you're coding significantly less than that, it's going to take you way longer. So how quickly you can scale up depends on how much effort you put forward. And it really is it's a very straightforward equation. The amount of effort you put forward directly and proportionally impacts the opportunities you create for yourself. All right. So I covered those 2 questions that were holdover questions from last week. Hopefully that's helpful. Question that just came through in an email is, what does a junior software engineer do mainly? I'd say the tasks that you'll probably get assigned early on as a junior are going to involve bug fixing, because that's usually seen as a safe place for folks. When you start working on the bug, you're either going to fix it or it's still going to be broken. So it's pretty obvious to see if your work is being productive and you're helping or if you're not. So I'd say Bug fixes, I would say also smaller features. So you might be on a feature and enhancing something that already exists. You're probably not going to be building brand new services or brand new properties and sites, things like that. Or you could be. They could give you like very specific instructions and be like, here is a high fidelity mock-up of how the page should look. I want you to transfer this high fidelity mockup into a functional HTML, CSS, semantic HTML, and us be able to then wire up the rest of the functionality to make this a working web page. So those are the kinds, that's in the skill range that I would expect a junior engineer spend the majority of their time doing. So hopefully it gives you a little bit of insight into like the daily tasks. You probably have a backlog of items. You'll be assigned a certain number of issues or stories, tickets, whatever you want to call them, to work on over a 1 or 2 week period of time. And many of them will be bugs, small features, and maybe it's like everything planned out for you. You just have to actually implement it. Second question that came through, what are some of the tools or resources to try and practice or learn code online? I've named a few. Free Code Camp, great site, lots of free resources, as the name implies, Free Code Camp. They've also got a pretty good Slack community, so lots of people that are there and that are eager to help jump in and mentor. There's Team Treehouse, real solid in terms of taking you from very beginner into some very specific stuff. It tends to be a little bit more hand-holding, and you tend to go a little bit slower if you're using like a Team Treehouse version of something versus maybe a Free Code Camp where you have to actually hands on the keyboard build out some projects. That's where you want to try and find. For me, the sweet spot is once you get through that initial learning curve, can you get to the point where you're working using the same tools that are being used in production, using the same kinds of environments that are being used in production, and be comfortable, opening up an editor and actually hands on the keyboard, writing out some code. So the sooner you can get yourself into the flow of doing that, the better. So there was, in Python, there was a training portal. It's called Python the Hard Way, or Learn Python the Hard Way. And it was literally like, okay, here's some text. Now make an application, right? And there's a learn you node. So there's some node equivalencies of that where you literally pull down a project and you write out the code to make that project functional and work. That was very much the way that we created our curriculum at San Diego Code School, because it's one of the faster methods to get you where you need to be. Is like having to actually debug code, having to piece together what is the flow that the application needs to, like, what's the logic and the flow control, as well as like all of the other syntax pieces, everything all at once. So it's tough, but you learn really fast. So that's where I would go. I would invest in working really hard over a shorter period of time than maybe some of the easier sources that will take you much, much longer. Because the longer you stay in the place where you're not getting paid, the more difficult it's going to feel over time. It's kind of like when I'm climbing a big hill on my bike. Sometimes you just want to get it over with. So you just want to let's get up the hill as fast as we can. Because if we go super slow, it's just going to be more painful for a longer period of time. So I might as well rip that Band-Aid off, get up, and get to the top as fast as you can. And then you can relax on the way down. All right, so that was an email question. Are there any other questions? I don't see anything else in the chat box, and I don't have anything else in my email. So unless I get another one in the next 10, 15 seconds, we're going to end a little early. And again, we do this every Tuesday. So I would encourage you to take the time between now and next Tuesday and work on some of the passion projects, work on some of the coding exercises that I talked about, being able to just open up an editor and get some code knocked out, and then apply to those 10 jobs, follow up, make sure you're finding internal champions at those companies, and the process should go much, much faster. Typically the folks that follow the process, when they start, they can usually have an opportunity and get to their first interview, I'd say inside of a month. Shouldn't take you much longer than that. If it's taking you longer than that and you're doing all those things I suggested, there's other problems in your process, and feel free to reach out to me. You can send me an email, mike@sdcs.io, and Share with me your spreadsheet that you're using to track your jobs, and I can probably look at your spreadsheet and very quickly tell you what the other holes are in your process and what you should try and do a little bit differently. So the spreadsheet, super critical, because that's kind of like the way we can look at real data and figure out what are some of the problems in the process that you're using. Besides that, it's like a lot of hard work, rinse and repeat, right? But if you're following a process, you're tracking your reach outs, your follow-ups, and you're doing a little bit of research on the companies, and you know where you're applying, you're not just taking a shotgun approach, then you're gonna be good, be solid. Awesome. All right, we're gonna end it there. I will see you guys all next week.